Hello, everybody. Sorry if we didn't have time to say hello to absolutely everybody in the chat there before we started. But yeah, great to see you. Thanks for being here. It's really a pleasure to see you all there, and I hope you enjoy the show. So I'm okay and raring to go. How about you, Rupert?
I'm okay and raring to go. Once again, I will apologise for the quality of my picture, but it's probably doing you a favour.
Well, you needn't have bothered to have a shave at this rate.
That's true. It is
Anyway,
true.
my proposal is that we crack on as quickly as possible with this one. If we get a moment later on, we'll do a bit of housekeeping and a few announcements and that sort of thing. But we'll see how the time gets gobbled up with this fabulous and long-reaching question that came to us from our Patreon supporter and long-time fan, Evan Hadkins, who asked us, did people play sports in the Neolithic and Bronze Age? I think at this point, before we embark upon this journey, it's worthwhile for a question like this. It's worthwhile making a disclaimer that we cannot and we are not claiming any kind of whatever we say. We're not claiming any kind of definitive answer to this question. There isn't any direct evidence for sports in the Neolithic and the Bronze Age, not that we know of. At least not in Northwest Europe. That is.
Okay.
Yeah. But in the Middle East and China, Mediterranean, that story is a bit different. But then again, it depends again what you mean by the Bronze Age as you go further east. The clearer question for us is: were people playing sports in prehistory? That's the real one. Seeing as the evidence for sports in the Bronze Age in the East becomes historical in the form if the written word. In the form of the written word, and clear depictions of it in art. Does that make sense? So, the other hidden thing about this is that we suspect that in Evan's question, there's something of a bit of a challenge, specifically for us. Because as a seasoned fan and Patreon supporter, Evan is well conscious of our contention that henges and other structures in the prehistoric landscape might have been used for sports, and that archaeologists are missing a trick by not considering that possibility. So I expect we'll get to that particular challenge to us later on in the show. But in the meantime, to begin with, I think we'll have a look at. The other thing is to say that to my mind anyway, I think this is the kind of way it works out, that there are probably three ways we could look at, things that persuade us or not, whether there was sports going on in prehistory, whether there's any direct evidence, what we can infer from sports that are even current today or went on in the relatively recent past, what we can infer backwards in time from that, like where do they come from? And then there's the element of pure conjecture, where we're talking really about how human nature and how we expect humans to behave given the circumstances that they're in. Human nature doesn't change that much, but the realm where it's just purely our conjecture. Got anything to add to that, Rupert?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that there is actually a bit of a crossover between the inference and the conjecture, because once again, it's like so many aspects of archaeology that it's down to how you interpret the evidence. And so there is no direct evidence for certain things, but you can look at them with an interpretive eye, even though the inference itself might be vague. That will come clear later on. It will make sense.
Yeah. So Kev says all early sports were martial arts, javelin, archery, hurley, shinty, hunting, wrestling, etc. They became sports, but of origin they were not. I presume you mean they weren't prehistoric. I don't know.
Well, I broadly agree with Kevin there, but I
Yeah.
think that there's inevitably going to be situations where you look at the way you are as school kids at school, that it's always, can you run faster than him? Or can you
Yeah.
jump further than him? So you get two guys out hunting animals, and it's got, who's the best shot from the greatest distance. That it might have been out of necessity that you're out hunting, but there's going to be that innate competition between the people out together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gilman, thank you for reminding us.
Thanks.
We started early, didn't we?
Yeah, dear.
Anyway.
Yes.
Anyway, we'll try and pay good attention to you folks in the chat. But where are we
Kevin's
going?
Give us a super chat. Thank you, Kevin.
Oh, bless you, man.
Thank you
Above
so
and beyond.
much.
So much appreciated. Yeah, cool. It seems from my looking at things that one of the earliest sports to have an actual record of some sort is boxing.
Yeah.
And it's scant, but kind of here we go. This is a terracotta plaque from Mesopotamia, dated to around, the first part of the 3rd millennium BC. Over on the right, it's pretty unequivocal. Those two guys are having fisticuffs. And here's a better one, also from Mesopotamia. I think this one is dated to a bit later. So that's the sort of direct evidence for boxing. The other sport, which we get early reference to, is wrestling. And I think there are others. And if you look about on the internet, you'll probably find earlier reference to this, but they're highly debatable. There are, for instance, suggestions that there are depictions of boxing or wrestling, I think it is, in the Lascaux caves. So, make of that what you will. There isn't a single piece of solid evidence or an image that I could discern as depicting wrestling. What do you think, Rupert?
No, well, there's a few similar to that, but it's because that's dated to, that's the tomb of Bakut the Third, isn't it?
Yeah,
2100 BC.
That's Egyptian. Yeah.
Yeah, it's there's not much that appears much before that, is there?
There is not,
because if you see, you see pictures of or depictions of people with bow and arrow, for example, archery, and there's some that goes back to Paleolithic, but you can't look at that and say it's sport. It's just a picture of of guys with archery. So how would you know?
I wish I could pay attention. Refer to every single.
I know there's a couple of independent comments that said it could just be a bar brawl. Yes, although in fairness, it was in a tomb, so I suspect, unless that's what's killed him. Of course.
I'm just for the record, just to include Tim's comment here that he thinks King Arthur's Hall on Bodmin Moor was used for sport, probably fighting. That's a very interesting point, and I think we need to know more about King Arthur's Hall. It's unusual in being a rectangular arrangement, but a very early arrangement. When people think about stone circles. And he says the line between warfare and games may be thinner than folk often think. And of course, Brendan, yes, we know where you got that from. I've seen that reference as well. But we put a huge question mark over the precision of the 1272 BC dating on that. But we'll come to that later. Anything else for the time being? How are we doing for time? We're going to keep checking on time because there's such a lot to cover and we've got to be disciplined about this.
Yes.
So before we move, there's just one more thing. On that very soon, you saw the mural, frieze, whatever, from the tune of what was his name?
Becket the third.
Becket the third. Very same tomb. There's this, which is one of the earliest depictions of a ball game of some sort. We don't know what this game was, obviously. Young girls, children, whatever, playing piggyback and a ball game at the same time. You know, how come that comes to be the first kind of reference? Oh, there is another one. I'll just get to it here. These are leather balls wrapped around hair and wool of some sort. 1000 BC, northern China, discovered in the graves of horse riders. And do you know what? That's about wraps it up for the known, for the actual sort of evidence, whether it be in art or actual archaeological finds.
Of prehistoric.
Of prehistoric. And, you know, so that answers that part of the question about whether the stuff was going on in the Bronze Age, because the stuff we've mentioned, you know, is largely going on in the Bronze Age, but nothing to push it back into the Neolithic, perhaps. But still, we've got to go with, you know, evidence and what we can infer from what we know. So why don't we look at this one, which is from the Mediterranean, from the island of Santorini. What's the name of the town?
As it was.
Yeah. I'm getting it mixed up with
Antikythera.
Antikythera.
This was,
yeah.
Yes, you are. No, this was Thera before it was Santorini. But yes. So what's this? This is 1600 BC?
1600 BC, so technically Bronze Age from our point of view. Yeah. I mean, it's a beautiful piece. But interestingly, though, they look more like children. Certainly youths, you know, and also boxing aficionados will say this is the first depiction of the use of boxing gloves. Hey-ho. But let's see, you know, staying in the Mediterranean, of course, we've got this wonderful thing depicting the sport of bull leaping. Is that from Knossos, isn't it? That's one of the phrases from Knossos.
Is it Knossos? Yeah, well, it's certainly Minoan. So I suspect that frieze, I mean, that's probably the best known, isn't it, of all the pieces of art about bull leaping. There's actually a lot more than, if you do a regular Google search, that's pretty much what you'll find with one or two other things. But actually, we managed to find a paper that was about bull leaping in the Mediterranean, and there's all sorts of coins and pots and engravings that show it all around the same period. You know, it's all around 1500 BC.
So obviously we're in the Mediterranean, so we can go on to talk about the Olympic Games, perhaps, Rupert. I mean, we mentioned stuff like we mentioned wrestling, javelin, and running, obviously, and those kinds of things. The next image I've got strangely enough, though, is just as a measure of the importance of these events. I think that's by mentioning this thing we're going to show you next is, you know, the Olympic Games took place for a long, you know, over centuries. Every year for centuries. Every 4 years for centuries. Wasn't
every 4 years, yes. Well, because originally, of course, it wasn't the Olympics. I mean, the games, they started way back in 776 BC. Is the official start date of these games. They were dedicated to Zeus. But they had, it started off, it was just a foot race. It was a running race.
Oh, right. Okay.
And that was all it was for years.
Oh, that's right.
It was just
and then Yeah, wrestling was the first other sport other than running sport to be introduced into the Olympic Games. I can't remember what year they put on that. But I'm just trying to, we are just trying to underline the importance of these things by, well, I don't know how well known a fact this is, but talk to us, Rupert, about the Antikythera mechanism.
Oh, yeah. This is an important clue in the that can be found. As you'll probably all know about the Antikythera mechanism. If you don't, it was essentially an early computer that was found on a shipwreck. We know that the shipwreck or the ship went down around 60 BC. And it was a trading vessel. We don't actually know how old the artifact is. It could have been. There are estimates that it was a couple of centuries old already, so it was an antique on the ship. But when they eventually managed to X-ray and what have you, and find out how this thing had been constructed, and they started putting reconstructions together, and they could, through X-rays and other techniques, they could read the writing on the discs. And apart from being a complete orrery, so it predicted the movements of I say predicted, it demonstrated the movements of the planets.
What you see in front of me there is a modern reconstruction, obviously, with the brass outer shell replaced by perspex sheets, so you can see the interior mechanism.
Yes. I mean, it really is an extraordinary piece of engineering. But the thing is that there were other dials on this. You can see on the main thing on the left, you can see there's a whole series of concentric dials there. And some of them, 4 of them, I think, were to predict isn't the right word to use here, but basically they were showing when the games were going to take place. So you had the movements of the planets going around, and like a calendar, it would show you when the games were going to take place. And in fact, this diagram, it shows you, so it's a side-on view, you can see that each of these is a dial. And you can see at the bottom there, it's got, on the bottom left, it's got calendars. And you can see the second one in from the left is Olympiad, but these are different games on the calendars. So, clearly, for someone to have gone to the trouble of making such an astonishingly complex piece of mechanics, it was clearly important for somebody to know when the games were going to be coming around. And how long must something have been in place for that degree of technology to have arisen to incorporate it? It's clearly not something that just arose
somebody's bright idea the year before. No. Absolutely. Okay. Anything we should pay attention to? Anybody said something wise or surprising or illuminating? You never know, do you?
That is true. Sumerians played... yes. Well, Jill has commented about the Sumerians playing board games. That's absolutely true. And obviously we haven't incorporated board games because there's evidence for... Oh, Lord, we did a piece on it, and I don't remember the date, but they've found board games in Egypt going back a crazy amount of time. And yes, you could argue, probably quite sensibly, that if you're playing board games, you've probably already been doing sport for a very, very, very long time. But we just didn't include board games in sports, so that's why we haven't gone into them here.
Yeah, for sure. So, but anyway, so from kind of more direct evidence of sports, we now sort of turn to inferring what might have been going on in prehistory from other, what kind of sports have been played. I tell you what, though, before we do that, I just want to do a shout out for our Patreon folk, by the way. In case anybody's there wondering how Rupert and Michael get to do this stuff day in, day out. Well, not exactly that. It's because of the support of our Patreon supporters. We thank you from the bottom of our hearts, and of course, welcome new members all the time. It's a fantastic group to be a part of. Many of whom, if you've not been here before, you'll see in the chat here. But we'd love to see you over at Patreon. And I think that the main thing about being a Patreon member is just because we do other things apart from these shows. And majorly at the moment, we're producing a film about long bearers. And just getting a little bit of the inside track about what goes on behind the scenes. And also you get your own podcast every Monday. Special exclusive podcast every Monday. I won't go on about that. But shall we tell folk about our ideas for filming coming up?
Well, that's a good idea. Let's do that.
Yeah. We've decided we're going to throw our cap over the wall and start proceedings to make a mega epic sort of film series, a sort of vlog travel series. Those of you who know us will know that that our passion is telling this amazing story of how from the earliest farming in Mesopotamia and the Fertile Crescent, humans came to leave their mark in the world in the form of the great tombs, henges and megaliths that we've got today. And the thing is, we're planning to make a series of films to illustrate that story, and of course we'd like your help. The working title for this series is The Road to Stonehenge. We're proposing an epic 5-part travelogue, taking the viewer along with us as we travel from Turkey and the early settlements such as Catalhurk and Göbekli Tepe via the routes taken by the early farmers as they spread west up the Danube and across the Mediterranean into Europe, and to eventually become the builders of the astonishing megalithic monuments we still wonder at today. We're looking at making each episode about an hour long, and we're going to be, because we're not quite ready to do this yet, but I just thought we'd prime folk for this, asking for support for the travel and the capital amounts we need to fulfill the principal photography for them in 5 tranches, starting now or soon with the first episode, which again, working title will be entitled, we think, Out of Mesopotamia, something like that. It gives you a clue to where we're going with this. So, the first episode.
It's quite funny that it's taken us this long to. In fact, I got to tell you, Mike's idea that because we were talking about making Standing with Stones 2 for a long time, and everybody wanted us to make Standing with Stones 2. And when we actually started trying to do it, we realised that what we wanted to do was, well, actually impossible unless somebody came and stumped up £1.5 million. And making essentially that, but more as a travel thing in 5 parts, suddenly made it a lot more feasible. So yes, it's going to be good, he said humbly.
Indeed. As I said, the setup for funding that isn't quite, well, it is in place because anybody going through to our Buy Me a Coffee campaign, the link is down below, will see that anybody putting funds in that way, their money goes straight into a tranche for the capital amounts for film production. It doesn't go into our daily sort of expenses. It goes into a fund for that specifically. And over the next week or so, you'll see the Buy Me a Coffee campaign changing to reflect what I've just said about this project. At the moment, it just says stuff is going into our filming without being specific. So that's it. So our Patreon, helps us day to day, keeps us going, helps us, put food on the table. Buy Me a Coffee helps us make films. That's about it in a nutshell. Time to move on. Where are we going
time
next?
To move on. Let's just, before we go on, let's just say, thank you, Martin. Martin's just said it's great that we're going out to film again. But Kev said, do you mean the woad from Stonehenge? That's the way it should be, with the woad. Yeah. The green grass of home.
For sure. Take us away, Rupert. Take us Take us to Rome.
Oh, okay. I'm going to take you to Rome. All right. This is something some of you will have heard me talk about these before. I'm going to read you a bit, actually, from a book here. The Romans, we've talked about blood sports in prehistory. Um, the thing is that we know that the Romans were monsters about it, and everybody knows about the gladiatorial games. But the Romans also put on shows called Venationes, and the Venatio were basically animal mayhem, and they would import animals from all over the Roman world, and basically disgusting. I'm going to read you a couple of paragraphs here. Just to give you a perspective of
So
what was
what have we
going
got to
on
put in?
in Rome.
I meant to have a picture from from Gladiator, the film. Thinking of in the
Yes.
thing with a tiger or two. Just to put people in the right frame of mind of what they're thinking of. So what should they be thinking of? The Colosseum or a lesser amphitheatre? Oh.
And indeed, all they used to put on these events in all the amphitheatres and circuses. I don't know how you define a circus. Is that just a small arena? Is that the technical thing of a circus? But it is recorded that they would go on in the big arenas and circuses. Um, but this paragraph, it just tells you a lot. One Venatio staged at the Circus Maximus in 169 BC saw the deaths of 63 leopards, 40 bears, and several elephants. In 55 BC, 500 lions, 410 panthers and leopards, and 18 elephants were slaughtered in 5 days. A Venatio thrown by Julius Caesar saw 400 lions destroyed in one event, while another one of his events, 500 footmen were pitched against 20 elephants, with 20 more carrying manned turrets on their backs. Some 500 bears were executed in one day at the order of Caligula to honour Drusilla. 9,000 animals were killed in the inaugural games of the Colosseum, whilst upon the return of Trajan from Dacia, an assortment of 11,000 animals were sacrificed. And there is one more little paragraph here that I would like to read because that says so much. The spectators were protected from the animals by ditches and raised platforms, but in a cunning move to win the crowd, Gordian I introduced a new form of venatio in which the public were able to participate. For the venatio deriptionis, a specially built forest was erected in the centre of the circus with transplanted trees, and hundreds of animals such as boar, sheep, ostriches, and deer were released into the arena. The public was invited to enter the enclosure and attempt to catch the game, with permission to keep whatever they managed to kill.
Who can guess why we bothered to mention an arena with an artificial forest in? Answers later on. Answers a bit later on. But it's astonishing. It's just worth letting that sink in a bit. I mean, to our ears, to our eyes, those thoughts of what was going on in those arenas is absolutely horrific. And yet, in relative terms, it's not that long ago. And if they were thinking that way then, how far back does it go, this relationship? It has to be said that they were bringing animals from North Africa on such an industrial scale that they actually put several species on the verge of extinction, did they not? And I think that's what stopped the practice, the scarcity
They did.
Yeah.
Yeah, they did. It just became too expensive.
Yeah. So ghastly stuff. So, that's a kind of marker in the sand. there's a picture you wanted to show, Rupert. Do you want to say words about this?
Yeah, indeed. Well, this is he was a 16th century engraver, and he engraved an awful lot of stuff based on historical text. So this was taken from Roman accounts, and this picture in particular is of is actually Alexander the Great's dog fighting a lion and an elephant in. Now that is Stradanus's interpretation of an arena. So you'll forgive the fact that it looks like it's inside somebody's grand hall.
Yeah.
But that was one. Have you got the other one there, Michael?
No, I haven't. I haven't.
Okay. The
I just thought,
Stradanus also did an illustration of one from another of the Roman accounts, which shows two wolves, a lion, and an aurochs being pitted against each other in an arena. So it's the point is that these games went on a massive scale. So extrapolating, the inference from that is, if they went on at that scale in history, what are the roots of those? How far back might that practice have gone?
And risk killing wins. Risk killing
does
wins.
Risk? What is it? What does Risk?
I don't know what he wins. You got it right. You got the.
Thank you, Risk. Thank you, Risk. Yes, spot on. Spot on. I don't know. We'll think of something.
Yeah. So we're still in the world of inferring from what we know of sports that have gone on in the recent past. Before we move on, there's something I missed for a sport that we do have evidence from, and that is Chu. It's a ball game from ancient China, which dates from around 200-300 BC. It's in the records. It was FIFA actually recognizes it as the earliest form of football. According to FIFA, Chu was first mentioned as an exercise in a military manual dating back to the 2nd and 3rd centuries BC. I just thought, soccer's important, so I thought I'd mention that. So we're still in the world of inference, but there are. Well, I'll tell you what. Let's sort of kick it off by looking at this and asking, what is going on here? Well, I think we know what's going on here, but what is going on here? Looking at two, I'm not going to flood you with pics of Highland Games, but what are the origins? How far back does this sort of stuff go? Now, I don't know much about the Highland Games, but more than the Highland, more than the Highland Games in Scotland can tell us, the Basque region of Spain, the population there has the strongest genetic connection way back to the Neolithic of any of the North and West European countries.
Not
alongside
the world's oldest language.
Also the world's oldest language. So, to all intents and purposes, these people, the present population of the Basque region, are direct descendants, percentage-wise, of Neolithic people, alongside Sardinians, it must be said. I think they hold can hold something to this. But what's the reason I'm going to the Basque country is that they still have an annual event called the Basque Rural Sports, at which things like This go on. Now, I'm not going to show you pictures of every single sport that they do at the Basque rural sports, but I'm just going to rattle through a list of the sports that happen. I'm not going to attempt the Spanish names or the Basque names for this. But we've got wood chopping, we've got dragging games, we've got stone lifting, hole drilling, anvil lifting, bale tossing, cob gathering, churn carrying. There's a cart game, scything, tug of war, that's a good one. Sawing competitions, weight carrying. I thought we'd had already done that with stone and anvils. Sack carrying, ram fighting, hoe throwing. There's a goose game. There's a sheep shearing competition, of course. Donkey races, would you believe? Shooting, I suspect that has more recent origins. Bowls. I'm just let that hang in the air there a moment. Bowls. Would you believe? Espadrille tossing. I should laugh.
Best thing to do with them, frankly.
I mean, we can't laugh. We've got the cheese rolling competitions, haven't we? What's the big cheese rolling thing that happens down a hill somewhere?
It's in Gloucestershire, isn't it? Or is it
Gloucestershire,
in Somerset?
yeah.
One or the other.
Yeah.
And we have Wellington boot throwing, don't we? Welly throwing competitions.
Yeah. There's something called... There's rowing competitions. There's something called the frog game. I hate to think. Stick pulling, a chicken game. Pitcher race. Basque balota. I think that's probably more recent, actually. That's an indoor game. Arm wrestling, bull herding, and sheepdog trials, to name but a few. So I suppose we're trying to gather stuff together now, gather sort of some pillars of support for our ideas about, what henges may have been about when you get people together in these kinds of arenas. Are these the kind of sports perhaps were going on? And I love this picture here, which is I don't know from what year that is, but this is from the Basque sports and ram fighting. Now, what I like about this one is that clearly this is inside of a bull ring. But you know what? That is such a good analogue of a henge. You've got the barriers there with the slight ditch in front of the wall to protect people. You've got people up the bank. Take away those enclosures at the top and you've got a henge. Or could we think the other way and think about putting those structures on top of a henge to make them complete? Who knows? I'm being a bit naughty there.
We proposed ages ago that there's no reason why the henges, banks of the big henges, couldn't have had wooden benches going all the way around them. It would be a very easy thing to do. And referencing that photograph that you just showed, I'll just read that bit again. About the Roman Venationes, the spectators were protected from the animals by ditches and raised platforms. All the that's all right. All the people up on raised above the central arena. It's all so much in the same ballpark. Ha ha, he said. I apologize for that.
Talking of bulls,
yes,
I thought you better address the kind of elephant in the room because I used this image as the thumbnail for the show, mostly because we're not going to say anything definitive about Scottish carved stone balls, but that it's a pretty image and it worked rather well, and it is.
But you think they are possibly game pieces, though, don't you?
Well, I think they possibly are. Whether they are or not is another matter entirely. Yeah. But for me, they're so close to a bull or a petanque ball. That tactile nature. that
Kevin has just said exactly that. Carved stone balls, Neolithic petanque. It's quite possible.
Yeah, and the designs on them are so close to some designs you see on modern petanque. Just to give a bit of context, that was the famous Towie ball we saw before, but here's an assortment, and you won't see something like this very often. This is actually from the display in the British Museum, at the British Museum Stonehenge exhibition earlier in the year, which went to. Seeing all these balls all together in the same place at the same time is quite astonishing. You can see how these things are just personalised, recognisably yours. You know whose ball is closest to the puck here, don't you?
It's funny. Genie X May said, "I thought they were weaving weights." Well, that's another possibility as well. I don't know why you'd have gone to that trouble.
That's the thing.
Make the Towie ball, but it's an interesting thing. Yeah,
there's a heck of a lot of work in each of those for somebody.
Yeah, huge amount. Yeah.
So you've got to balance that. I think it's something that people want to put some kind of investment into that's theirs, and it's known, so it's known to be theirs as well. You have a different take on it, but for the purposes of this show,
well, in a nutshell, if we're going to talk about the balls briefly, I think they're like apprentice pieces that when you see, some of them are so crude. And then you end up with an astonishing piece of artistry like the Towie ball that is in the thumbnail. That it's similar to embroidery samplers for me. That you'll see young girls with fairly basic embroidery, but gradually going up to these astonishing pieces of absolutely beautiful mastery. And I see it analogous to that for masons. Really, again, it's just a guess. No evidence for it.
These wouldn't be throwaway things. These are these are personal. In my view, they're personal possessions. But I'm completely open to persuasion on it. It's just my favoured thought on the matter. Let's move on to us and our thoughts on sports in prehistory, which is really what was the basis of the question, I think, and with the. We've let it run away a bit, I'm afraid. We were over 3/4 of an hour into this, so, let's rattle on through. But, hey, we need to talk about henges. We need to talk about henges and our ideas about henges and how that kicked off for us, because it's an unusual idea. It's something we hadn't had a prior investment in or, had thought through or, just wanted to be different for the sake of it. It really arose from our experience making Standing the Stones and being at the sites and just letting our imaginations go a bit. But it was more than that, because we both had the same idea without talking to each other. We both had the same idea at the same time.
It was a phone call.
Immersed, exactly. It was. Having been immersed in looking at them, and me immersed in recreating the CGI for them, we just couldn't get over the idea that these were arenas, and our only explanation for some of the strange things you get inside them could only be accounted for, were likely to be accounted for by blood sports, which is why you mentioned the forest, the artificial forest in the arenas in ancient Rome, and people being invited in to hunt animals, artificially hunt animals in these things. Let us talk about the primary inspiration for our thoughts about audiences watching something going on that was relevant to them, a sport or something. Blood sports, to cut to the chase, which was our first thing.
It was when we were at Stanton Drew, because we'd looked at any number of henges before that, and there was always the impression.
Well, would you like to talk over this image, Rupert, and explain?
Yeah, absolutely. So that henges obviously can be interpreted as arenas, But it was when we saw the results of the magnetometry survey at Stanton Drew that showed that it was 9 concentric rings of timber posts, and each of the posts. So this is not a drastically accurate overlay that this person has done, but the posts were actually a meter in diameter and a meter apart. So,
So I'm gonna show my or our reconstruction,
Yeah,
which
because you did a great
which I'd
one for the
modify
film.
now, but this was what I did for the film, based on the evidence.
Yeah.
And that is
so
an
that's-
iteration that doesn't conflict with the evidence. There's nothing there invented. Yeah.
No, absolutely, and I think that the interesting aspect of this is, so if you take this as, it's absolutely bang on for what the archaeological evidence says, except that it's quite possible that the bank was higher and the ditch was wider at the time.
I would say,
At the
from
time that
my
it was
own point of view, if I
constructed.
was doing it again, I wouldn't make the bank so steep. But there we go.
Yeah, although to be fair, okay, it's all right. We don't need to analyse that, do we?
No.
Now, you also have the thing that it has always been proposed by archaeologists, and perfectly reasonable, that so if you measure that a post has been sunk 6 feet into the ground, rule of thumb for particularly stones sunk into the ground is that you have a quarter to a third below and 3/4 or 2/3 above ground. So they have always interpreted, if a post has been sunk 6 feet into the ground, then it's probably 18 feet tall, approximately, out of the ground. And Mike and I have argued that, well, actually, it doesn't need to be the case, because one of the reasons that it doesn't need to be so tall, but does need to be sunk so deep in the ground, is that if we are talking about blood sports, or certainly animal sports here, and you've got something like an aurochs bashing into these things, that it only needs to be, say, 5 or 6 feet tall for it to be a usable part of the sport. But it really does need to be 6 feet sunk into the ground so that a huge vine can't knock it over or make it loose. So you could have got 3 lengths of timber out of a single tree. It doesn't necessarily mean that you had to cut down Lord knows how many trees to achieve that same result, if you see what we mean. It's a shame, actually. You should try to find online as well. There's some film about modern day. I say modern day, they're using old techniques, but the people who manage fighting bulls, and how they run along the tops of walls that are just high enough to keep them safe from the bulls themselves. And same can apply here. You could have had guys leaping along the tops of those posts and doing unspeakable things. Could have had wild boar in there and been hunting them between the trees. The thing is that you've got the ditch is completely protecting the audience. The animals, if they did run out of the or off that central plateau, they would have just fallen into the ditch. And at Stanton Drew, it was about 17 feet deep or something like that. Massively deep. Not as deep as Avebury, but
yeah. So I don't think we should try to over-explain our reasoning here. In the world of conjecture, we should really just throw it out there as another way of looking at things. Like I said right at the very beginning, we can't, say definitively that this is what it was. Our complaint is that this conversation isn't allowed into the general conversation so much, and that's what we're trying to do. Just alter the thing. Another way of looking at this. Anybody guess where this is? It's the Yorkshire Showground up in Harrogate, an annual show in which all the great and good of the farming world come together with the horses, their sheep, their cattle, their whatever, their sheepdogs, machinery, and just show it off. They show off the stuff, they show off their animals, they show off their skills, okay, on an annual basis. And anybody recognise that? Clue, it's not that many miles from Harrogate. What you just saw, the great Yorkshire Showground. These are the Thornborough Henges in an artist's impression of them. They don't look like that now, but
Yeah.
what? I'm just throwing it out there. Again, similar part of the country, available to people from the south, available to people from the north. It's halfway up the country, and very not far at all from the main road linking north and south. The A1, the A1 now. Lord knows what was before. Anyway, that's all we got as far as pictures are concerned. And wow, time has run away with us. But I said I promised a sort of cherry on the cake for all this this argument about sports in prehistory, and I'll sort of lever us into it, I think, by mentioning hurling. Is that fair?
Yes, that's very fair.
Hurling is one of the oldest field games in the world, and has been popular, it says here, I'm reading, I must confess, for at least 3,000 years in Ireland, with the first literary reference dating back some time. I'm not going to quote that number. We saw it earlier, and I think that can't be right because you can't. There's no basis for that date. But the thing is, hurling is often referenced in Irish myths and legends, the most famous of which has to be the early account found in the Táin Bó Cúailnge, a legendary tale from early Irish literature which describes the exploits of the Ulster hero Cuchulainn, who was so named after killing a fierce guard dog by driving a hurling ball down his throat. And there you have it. That's not the only mention in Irish mythology about that relates to sports and establishes sports. Now, people will say, well, those were written down in the 12th century or something like that. But this comes from an oral tradition, and what I'm getting round to saying is that in this same line of myth and legend, sites like Newgrange, Douth, Nath, Rathcrogan are mentioned directly. Those ancient and sites that date back to the Neolithic are mentioned directly in Irish myth and legend. Not by the current names that we have for them. The Rathcrogan has retained its name. But that brings us to an interesting tale, Rupert, and I hope you've got sort of easier access than I have to some of the reference that we're going to...
I confess I just extracted a couple of sentences because otherwise it would have been too long. But this is... Oh, you'll remember better what it's from, Michael, but this is talking about Newgrange, where... and I've cut it out, and I can't remember who's advising who. It says he advises Angus to go to the Bruig at Samain, and Bruig is Grange. He would find
Samhain, of course, is Halloween. So it's the beginning of the
he would find Elkmar at Nookside in the Bruig, holding a fork of white hazel, wearing a cloak with a gold brooch in it, watching the 350s of youths play on the playing field. He's talking about Newgrange.
And the reason we get to hear about this is because our attention has been drawn to this by our friend Anthony Murphy, the Irish mythology expert, who also happens to be Mr. Dronehenge, who was responsible with his drone for discovering a whole fantastic complex of henge-like structures just below Newgrange and between the mound of Newgrange and the other mound over the other side of the river, which I forget the name of. But this legend is directly referencing Newgrange and, is it Crochan? No, it's not Crochan, is it? It's something, the name of the other centre. But he's talking about looking down on the playing fields between Newgrange and this other mound and seeing the boys playing in the playing fields.
Yeah.
And is it, and the word we're talking about is Ernach, isn't it? And
Yes,
we're reckoning that Ernach is an Irish word for a henge. And it's not it's not us reckoning that. It translates as the.
Well, there's a compound word, Ernach Cluchi, and I'm sorry because that's going to be the wrong pronunciation, but Ernach Cluchi is a compound word that means games assembly.
Yeah, that was it. And that's the thing. Ernachs were these festivals which took place up and down the country, maybe on these festival times. And that is what happened. People came together, celebrated, played games. And in the myth, we've got three major Ernach sites, according to the Livorna Hoidre, where Ernach Crochan, which is at Rathcrogan, where Rupert and I were. We were there. It's so thrilling.
only a few weeks ago.
Only a few weeks ago. Ernach Talton. And Ernach in Broggo, and Ernach in Broggo is the festival in the Boyne at Newgrange. In other words, so this is fantastic stuff. And there's another reference to it as well, where what happened to what's his name this time? You see, this is not committed to any kind of memory, as you can tell yet, and I'm still messing about with bits of paper. I've lost the bit of paper I need, Rupert. Help. No, seriously, help. Don't laugh.
What are you looking for?
I'm looking for this. Yeah, no, Dagda told his son that the land he had chosen for him was still occupied by Elkmar. He advised Angus to go to the Broig at Samhain. He would find Elkmar at Knock Cedar in the Broig in Newgrange, holding a fork of white hazel, wearing a cloak with a gold brooch on it. You said this, 350s of youths playing on a playing field. A year later he comes back, and there are two groups of youths playing on the field, and they're having an altercation. He tries to intervene and has his eye bashed out by the throwing of a holly stick or a holly sprig. Now, coming back to hurling,
yeah.
And there is another element of Irish culture that we haven't mentioned yet, and that is stick fighting, otherwise known as Batteracht. Okay, Batteracht is a category of stick fighting. It's a martial art of Ireland. The concept of people swinging sticks at each other in anger dates far into prehistory. Again, I'm reading. It's likely to have started with the hominids that existed before Homo sapiens. Neanderthals are known to have crafted heavy sticks into tools that were multi-purpose and resembled many modern batters. Although stick fighting is prehistoric, the vocabulary of Batteracht can be traced back to Old Irish, one of the oldest languages in Europe. And there we have it. If you're wondering, what a stick, there's a word for the stick, of course, and it's a shillelagh. So, shillelagh, usually made of blackthorn and all kinds of brutal methods can be used with one of these sticks to harm
but
your.
I think the really interesting thing for me that just kind of hides in there is that the myth says that he had his eye poked out by a holly sprig. A holly sprig was thrown at him, and I just think that the shillelaghs were traditionally made. They could be made of, well, they were usually made with blackthorn or holly. But the root, not the. It's usually the root because the root is that much harder. And you only need to mistranslate, a holly sprig. What is it? If somebody said from the piece of holly and the translator just got it wrong and it was a root instead of a sprig, and there you have a shillelagh, which would take your eye out.
And answer me this question: why does a hurley, the stick you use in hurling, look like a refined, modified shillelagh? It all sort of comes together. Thank you, Amber. That's so kind.
Amber,
bless you.
That's very nice. It's nice to see you.
Hey, now listen. We've covered all our bases. Some parts well, some parts not so well. So I hope you'll forgive us for stuttering at the end there, but I hope that little bit of extra juice from myth, has you thinking a bit. It certainly is grist to our mill, isn't it? Watch this space for sort of more news on that front. I think it's an hour. We've been talking for an hour. We meant to finish this earlier, but hey ho, we had to cover the ground.
We knew there was a risk with this one because there was just so much to pack in.
Yeah.
Thank you guys. Do hit that like button, hit that subscribe button.
Evan,
hit
thanks
the bell
for the question.
Notifications.
Yeah.
And yes, thank you, Evan. Yeah. Excellent.
Nice one. Just before we go, if you want your question considered for this show, leave it in the description below, or if you're a Patreon member on the Patreon post over on the Patreon page. We will consider all of them, but only a few can make it to the final finishing line. So think hard about your question and how it can be distilled down into 70 characters or that, so it can form. This is the whole point. These questions form the description for the YouTube show. That's all we need to say. Thank you for sticking with us, folks. I hope you enjoyed that. We've certainly illuminated ourselves a little bit by doing the research. I hope you've found that fascinating too. With that, we'll say ta-ra for now.
Thanks a lot, folks. See you next time.